Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County live webinar. The subject and title is Tech Security for Small Business. It's easy and inexpensive. Sounds kind of miraculous, but it must be true. I'm Steve Smith, the webinar coordinator and business mentor at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'll be your host today. The presenter will be Bud Freund. More about Bud in just a minute, but now a little blast on SCORE. Many of you have already heard this, but I'll make it quick. We've got SCORE is a part of the Small Business Administration in the U.S. government. We've got over 11,000 volunteers on a national basis. We were started in the mid-'60s, as I said, as a part of the Small Business Administration. For the chapter here in Fairfield County, located in Norwalk, we have approximately 100 volunteers with various degrees of expertise in industry, process, subject matter, things of that type on running small businesses and intermediate-sized businesses in particular. We offer subject matter experts to you on a one-on-one basis in a counseling mode, usually at our offices at 111 East Avenue in Norwalk. We also have workshops that are held primarily in libraries around Fairfield County, for example, New Canaan, Westport, etc. And, of course, we also have this webinar program. For a full list of services and how you tap into SCORE Fairfield County, please go to scorefairfieldcounty.org. No caps, no spaces, just scorefairfieldcounty.org. You'll get the full listing of our services and how you tap into them. Our next webinar, obviously with the holidays coming up, is not going to be until January 10th, when Cliff Ennico will present Keeping Lawsuits at Bay. Look for the specifics at SCORE Fairfield County, and also you will be receiving a marketing brochure on this event sometime very soon, and then 1 week prior to the event. Okay, so on to today's webinar. We're going to end sharply at 1. The conference is being recorded, and the link to the recording and the slides will be available at scorefairfieldcounty.org sometime within the next week. We've set aside time for Q&A at the end of Bud's presentation. So if you have a question, please use the chat window in the lower left-hand corner and put your question there, and then towards the end of it, I will moderate the questions through the chat room. So on to Bud. Bud is a SCORE mentor and also workshop presenter, webinar presenter, obviously, and also co-producer of our webinar program. He's also, although I hate to say this in public, but he's an all-around good guy. Bud makes computers do what they're supposed to do and stop doing what they shouldn't. That's the easy part of it. That's making it easy. He's been teaching technology to users of all ages and providing tech support to small businesses looking for cost-effective hardware and software solutions for almost 20 years. As I said, he's a frequent SCORE presenter. He's a certified SCORE mentor. He focuses on technology, tricks, topics, and trends. I'm going to turn it over to Bud now, and as I said, when we reach a point to the end of his presentation, I'll pop back on and moderate the Q&As, which we encourage you to use at your leisure. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to turn it over to Bud now. Go, Bud.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you all for joining us. There's a lot to cover today, and before we get started on this laundry list of stuff, I want you to take a moment and think about the last time that you wanted to do something as a consumer and you weren't able to do it because the computer wouldn't let you. In other words, you had to go to a different ATM, or you needed to go inside the gas station because you couldn't pay at the pump, or you called up to schedule an appointment and somebody said to you, please call back, they're working on the database. When this stuff happens to us as the consumer, it's a momentary inconvenience. We grumble about it, we go about our business, and we continue on with our lives. When this happens to us as the business owner, we cannot let it put us out of business. So if you do nothing else from this webinar, sit back and take a moment to think about how you would do these 4 items over here, because when your computer stops working, you can't go out of business, and you need to have some alternative method of keeping yourself going. And understand, by the way, that Sony, a company that wants to sell you that backup computer, and they make a very good machine, when they got hacked, they had absolutely no idea of what to do in order to keep their business going, and it was a nightmare for a rather short period of time for them. So, moving on, I wish I could tell you that there was a single product that you could purchase, the XYZ 2000 or whatever piece of hardware or software, and you would be completely done with all of the security and protection that your computers would need for your business. But unfortunately, that just isn't the case. It's more about a mindset and the being aware of what's around you and the pieces that are involved in running your business. And the first part of what I'm going to be discussing, and we'll hit all those bullets, I promise, but the first part we're going to be discussing is going to be more along the lines of, gee, I didn't think about that, or gee, I didn't realize I need to think about that as well. So, moving on, the more security you have, the less freedom. The more freedom you have, the less security. And for your business, it's really a matter of coming up with a balance along the way, first off. Secondly, if your business has not evolved to a point where technology is no longer your cost center, but rather your profit center, take some time to think about how that can be facilitated as well. Traditionally, computers were a cost center. We had to buy new machines, we had to buy new software. Today, there are companies that are thriving in the world of technology, and we use the technology to grow and build our businesses. And understand that your business is not the only business that's being faced with this issue. The fashion industry is trying to figure it out. This article was just fabulous. I'll spare you the details of it, but this takeaway quote was really quite significant in understanding that you're not alone in this process and or dilemma. And the reason that we're not alone in it is because of this notion that I want what I want when I want it, or as I prefer, the I want it now generation. We are the first group to be able to have this instant gratification. Wow, what nice looking shoes. You go on Zappos and you download it. Oh, that's a good book. You go to Amazon and you download it. And as a society, we are not faring very well with it. I'll give you a quick story. About a year ago, I was up in West Hartford for a conference, seminar, workshop. I don't know what exactly they called it, but I'm in a room with about 100 people, and the speaker is works for a global media publication. They're all global now. Once you're online, you are a global entity. She's got a byline. She's got several books out. She tells the audience she has 7 children, and she says to us, when it comes to technology, you should trust your instincts. And please forgive me, but right out of the gate, I had a major disconnect between the notion of, I have 7 kids, you should trust your instincts. I thought that was a problem. But when it comes to technology, let me explain to you why I don't believe that you should trust your instincts. This report by IBM was on 1,200 companies, and when 95% of those companies had some issue of human error as part of the hack that was the result, I urge you not to trust your instincts. Our instincts are not particularly good. Part of why our instincts aren't very good is because if you can sell 13 million phones in 3 days globally, you will be lucky if your salesperson says hello and thank you to you, let alone providing you with any kind of educational information. Now, the other thing to bear in mind, and this again is another IBM report, 66%, two-thirds of companies that get hacked will not survive the hack. And it's growing. It is a growing business, believe it or not. There is actually a website where you can hire a hacker just like you would go to Craigslist. This is a thriving concern now, and people are paying to break into other people's technology. And if you doubt that it's available on a wide basis, this stuff that we used to look at in the James Bond movies and be able to think about as something that was for spies only is now available for sale in the Sharper Image catalog. So if you've got process in your company, you may want to tell people to check all of their writing materials and only bring a pencil and a piece of paper into the meeting. Also, that little micro SD drive there that's sitting on that finger, they're now teaching dogs to sniff out the chemical that is sprayed on the circuit boards to prevent them from overheating. And the way that the dogs stay in training, read the article, is that they train every single day. If they find the SD card, if they find the thumb drive, they get to eat dinner. If they don't find it, they get hungry. So understand that the process is changing dramatically, and if you've got data, you may want to figure out where it's being stored and who has access to it. Also understand that the hacks are getting bigger and bolder, and we've been seeing this for years and years. These are just two screenshots from the last 2 weeks. This is stuff that is regular, ongoing. All you have to do is look in the papers and understand that in the list of viruses in the world, there are 1,000 that start with just the letter A. This stuff is proliferating, and it's everywhere. So you, as a business, may want to consider insurance, because if you aren't insured and you have a problem with your data and it is somebody else's information and it is stolen, the cost of remediation is going to be approximately $158 per record in order to have Experian or some other company monitoring your customers for the year that you would be obligated to be providing them with protection. Now, this was an article, a report that was done by Deloitte, and if you work your way through these 14 cyber impact factors that a group of people at Deloitte went through, understand this is a big report, there's artwork, people sat down and had to collaborate, had to come to agreements on it, and I've looked through this thing, and the question that I would like to ask, if you go through them, you'll see as well, do you think that education should be an above-the-surface cost or a below-the-surface cost? And here are people at Deloitte who completely overlook the need for education of people either in your company or people that you work for or people that you email to about what happens with a cyber attack. Education is a critical component now, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But the reason that all of this stuff is going on is because, plain and simple, computers talk to each other. When you strip it down to a really simple, basic what's going on here, you've just got computers talking to each other 24/7, 168 hours a week, 61,000 hours a year. They're just talking, and Lashon Hara is Hebrew for evil tongue. And you don't know what's going on in the conversation. Sometimes they're good conversations and sometimes they're not. And as I mentioned, here at Deloitte, they're spending $400,000 a year on salaries, and these people haven't figured out at that salary level that if you don't educate people about what's going on with their computers, there is the potential for problems. And before I forget, I want to spend a brief moment talking about the Internet of almost everything, as I like to call it, which is where your refrigerator is going to be connected into your network, and it's going to send a signal to the Fitbit that's on your wrist while you're walking around in the supermarket, and you get that 20,000 volt on your arm, and you sit up and realize that you need to pick up milk. Now, understand that the more things you attach to your network, the more points of entry are available on your network. And if you do not change the default password on any of these devices, those pieces of information are readily available online for the people who want to use them and for the people that you don't want having access to that information. We'll talk more about passwords in just a little bit, but understand that once you've got all of these things on your network, you've got multiple points of entry, and you either need to secure them, or if you're not using them, remove them. We're not getting a lot of help in the arena of security from the media either. Take that top headline. Email was not the big loser of this election, folks. People using email badly were the big losers, but email in and of itself, it did what it's supposed to do. The software keeps working. That middle headline, hackers are not tricking email systems. Hackers are tricking the people who are using the email systems. It's not the hardware and the software, it's the people who are using them. And the need for education, I cannot stress it enough. And understand also, none of this stuff goes away. You have a hack, the stuff that goes out online is out there forever. That Dropbox hack, that was a 4-year-old hack. They are still trying to recover 68 million passwords, and they will not be able to do it. Yahoo, the reports most people indicate are that it was 500 million accounts. From what I read from this article, the main computer at Yahoo, central clearinghouse, if you will, was the machine that got hacked. That number is astronomical. Now, my wife works at a company where they keep using this phrase problematic to the point where I've thought that the problematic is a machine like a Popeil's pocket fisherman. You throw in a couple of variables, a few situations, some parameters, the opportunities. You throw in a few bucks and you either come up with a problem or you come up with a solution. So I want to walk through this collection of stuff. Some of them we will address in greater detail farther down the line, but let's start with education. Have I mentioned, by the way, that education is probably one of the most important things that you can do to keep your business secure, is to be reading regularly about what's going on and what is happening around you. And your staff needs to be educated as well, even if it's a quick 2-minute conversation or if it's an email that you expect them to read and you'll ask them about it later. But keep people informed. It's really important. As a business owner, know what devices are on your network and how to manage the devices on your network. And I have a little farther on, we'll talk more about routers because they are a critically important part of securing your business network. Passwords, if you lock your door at your house, if you lock your car when you leave it in a parking lot, you need to lock your computer now because it is just another place, another point of access. Backups, we will talk about the 3211 backup, which in a brief overview, put your data in 3 different places, 2 different media, one of them off-site and one of them offline. And again, I will give you greater detail on that later on. If you do not have antivirus on your computer, either do not connect it to the internet or get it installed. It's one or the other. When you talk about policies and procedures, it's very similar to my Captain Renault there. You cannot have your staff looking at you and saying, I'm shocked. I'm shocked to learn that somebody actually broke into our offices. This stuff is going on. It's no longer something that you can turn a blind eye to. Policies and procedures, again, a little more coming up. In a variety of places, they are the law. If you do not have them in your business, I would urge you to take some time and figure them out. They are a necessity for your network being secure. And by the way, if I haven't mentioned the fact that you need to regularly update your computers and your hardware and your software to plug up the holes that are being found by other people, and people deconstruct both machinery and software. There are 80,000 doors into a computer. If you do not close the doors, people will find them. So you can't keep your head in the sand anymore. This stuff is just going on constantly. Now, if you have a problem, I strongly recommend that you own it. If you go back to the days of Tylenol, the first thing that they did was to say, we really did have a problem, we really did need to fix it, and we have taken steps to safeguard against the problem recurring. Intel, when they had a problem with their floating point calculator and you couldn't do math, they decided they didn't want to own that, and it was a problem for them. Today, we're facing issues at Facebook about fake news, and we really didn't have any involvement in any kind of political affiliation at Facebook, and I'm not sure that that really is the case. It is a far better idea to be upfront with the people who do business with you and the people who work for you. If you have a problem, you gotta own it. And by the way, those of you who remember Supertramp, that album, that's the cover to the album Crisis, What Crisis? Talk about Facebook for a minute, because when you've got employees who are regularly distracted, and at this point, it's not 50 contiguous minutes. They're not sitting online looking at Facebook for 50 minutes. It's I hop on, I hop off, I go back on, I go back off, I'm not doing anything, I'll touch that instead of this. We're getting to the point of $3.5 trillion of wasted productivity over people not doing jobs and going on to social media. If you don't have a policy and procedure in your office, I'd recommend creating one for social media, because here are the stats. You've got people who are going online. You've got companies that have policies and procedures, and according to research, 3/4 of the people who are being surveyed say, I don't care what my company says, I'm going to do as I please. Well, that may not be somebody you want working for you. You may want to reconsider the policies and procedures of your company. They're very important. You'll also want to consider the websites that you will allow people to go to or not go to. And my brother has been making Thanksgiving dinner for many, many years, and at the end of his Thanksgiving dinner, he has been looking at my kids and telling them annually the same thing, I will share it with you. He says to them, and I quote, don't do anything stupid. And they have been observing that, and it makes my life considerably easier at home. As I mentioned earlier, there are businesses where policies and procedures are a requirement because either they're under the guise of HIPAA, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, Gramm-Leach-Bliley, or Sarbanes-Oxley, which affect the financial industries and publicly traded firms. And in each of these places, there are requirements for what computers are allowed to do, how computers are supposed to be connected to networks, what you can let people into and onto, passwords. All of these things are defined, and I know for HIPAA, having read through the document, if you are a medical office, you need to have a written policies and procedures manual to explain to your employees how they are supposed to be handling what's called protected health information, or PHI. And for those of you who thought that if you get an Apple computer, you are immune to all of this stuff, please understand that there is a piece of software built into the operating system of Apple computers called Spotlight, which is basically tracking everywhere you go and everything you do unless you turn it off, very similar to Google if you log into your Google account, or to Microsoft if you log into your Microsoft account. So people are tracking the where you're going and what you're doing. So again, this is information that people outside of your business can use for marketing or tracking or any other purpose. So these are just areas that you as business owner need to think about how you can plug up these holes. So let's talk about passwords for a moment, because they are an extremely important aspect of computing these days. You'll need it on your computer. You will need it on your router. You will need to change it from the default password, because default of the computer is not always the computer. Sometimes default of the computer is the user. So change your passwords, and I'm a very big fan of this mnemonic here where you transpose letters to numbers. And as long as you don't get crazy with something like anti-disestablishmentarianism, and I always get caught on that cap H over there, if you keep it fairly simple, you'll be in a much better place and you'll remember what your passwords are. Now, I've also read elsewhere that if you use a person, a place, and a thing, and you join them together and then you transpose it, you've got a bulletproof password. Nobody's going to break in once you get to that point. And what's equally as important about passwords is that you write them down, but don't leave them as a sticky on the monitor. That's a really bad place. In the world of security, this is known as social engineering. People will look over your shoulder to see what you're typing. People will look at what you've left taped to your monitor, and this does not help your cause. So please, plan accordingly. It's just going to be for the safety and security of your business. Now, 3 years ago, I was greeted to this New York Times article on New Year's Day where basically they said that if you are spending any money as a small business on antivirus, you will have a more visceral experience if you set it on fire, because until you get into large industry, banking, hospitals, larger companies, antivirus is a reactive industry. I create a virus, they create a virus killer. I create an even better virus, they create an even better virus killer. With 80,000 doors and 1,000 viruses beginning with the letter A alone, the antivirus industry cannot keep up. So it is as much a matter of what you look at and what you click and what you do as it is a matter of the antivirus that you have. And I am a very large fan of an antivirus called Bitdefender. I will tell you that their free version works very well, but it is for personal use, not business use. I will also tell you, having just done the install the other day, the paid version is a very convoluted process of installation. Where else are we here? Browsers. I'm a huge fan of Firefox, which is a standalone browser as opposed to Internet Explorer. I'm being reminded to post questions in the bottom left corner if you've got them. I'm very happy to answer them at the end. Please remember to pose them. Search bars. For those of you who own as opposed to rent, you can purchase for $100 a surge protector that will go into your fuse box. I cannot tell you the cost of the electrician to do the install, but if you put a surge protector into your fuse box, you are now protecting all of the devices that may be in your home or your place of business through a central source, as opposed to all those power strips that have surge protection. In other words, you can protect your stereos and your televisions, as well as your computers and your charging when you're charging your mobile devices. Did mention 3211 backup. It is coming, folks. I didn't want to forget myself either. Talk about CryptoLocker very briefly, because we are familiar with online storage such as Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Docs, and CryptoLocker is unfortunately a system where anything that's in the folder that gets caught gets encrypted, and if you pay the ransom, sometimes they give you back your files, other times they do not. There are some encryptions that are retrievable. There are others, one I know for a fact called Nepto, N-P-T-O. If you get hit by the Nepto virus, wipe your computer, you have had a total loss. And this stuff is happening on mobile devices as well as going on to your computers, Android devices. Put some antivirus on there. There's a program called Lookout, I believe. It's a free download. And if you're on an iPhone, proceed very cautiously in this holiday season. There are a number of fake apps that may look like the website that you want to go to and shop on, but they are a spoof. Proceed cautiously. Let's talk about email and texting for just a moment. I got this email telling me that I had sent something or something I was sending internationally needed to be checked. I don't send anything international, so I already know that this is going to be a really bad item. I also know for a fact that FedEx does not need to use support@dentistelmhurstny.com as an email address. If I click that button, it would be a really bad thing. If you have Microsoft hosted Exchange, you have an online backup for your email as opposed to a free service. I am a huge fan of paying for email if it is the lifeblood of your business. Watch out for typos when you get your emails. It's a giveaway that something may not be exactly what it's supposed to be. If you get something that could potentially be from a Wells Fargo or a Chase Manhattan Bank, and there's a typo in it, it probably isn't from who you think it's from. If you are doing texting and you have to be in a secure environment, Wicker works very well. It's a texting application that will allow you to read the text, and then the text will essentially self-destruct after a period of time, and it no longer resides on either the sender or the recipient's phone. So, smartphones. We now have two sets of numbers that follow us all over our lives. One is your Social Security number, which we are being warned to proceed very cautiously with who you give that out to. With your cell phone, that now becomes part of many, many databases, and again, that piece of information gets passed around. There is a free piece of software that you can get on either an Android phone or on an Apple phone called Sideline, and it will provide you at no cost with a second telephone number that would be married to your mobile device. So, If you've got a primary number that you use for your business, you could use Sideline as the phone number that you enter into databases as the giveaway. Or if your phone, if you want to use Sideline as the personal number, you now have a second opportunity to have a phone number. And again, these numbers are ours for life. They are traveling with us everywhere we go. So proceed with caution, folks. Also, if you've got a video in your laptop, you may want to put a piece of tape over it, a piece of software called Black Shades, and that's one of many different choices, can grab in and look back at you and what you are doing. So, routers. The most important item that I can talk to you about in your business network, it is the control center for what gets onto the Internet and what cannot get onto the Internet. And there are two ways that you can manage the devices that get onto your Internet. You can do it by the MAC address, which is unique to every computer and mobile device. That number is married to the device forever. It never changes. Or you can get onto an Internet through what's called an IP address, which, depending on how your computers are set up, that number is either fixed or it can change. If the number is changing, then you cannot enter restrictions on a computer. If you make it a static number, or if you allow computers on through the MAC address, you can regulate what machines go on and at what times they're able to do that. And all of that is done through this area inside of the router called the GUI, which is basically a dashboard that you will find inside of your router. And all these things now look like they come out of Star Wars. I don't think it makes them work any better. It's just a design thing to look really fancy. Wired and wireless. I am a very big fan of wired networks, connecting by hard wire. If you have a network that is connected by hard wire, you know what machines are on it. You can unplug and they are off. With a wireless network, if you have a problem, you're grabbing at air to solve it, or in order to resolve a problem, you may need to restart your router, which then kicks everybody off of the Internet. With a wireless machine, unless you go in and monitor regularly, you're not going to always know who is connected or where they are. Also, understand that with mobile devices, particularly with employees, they have two doorways out to the Internet. They can use your Wi-Fi, which would allow them to get out to the Internet for free. If you were to cut them off by a MAC address, they would still be able to get out to the Internet through their data plan, which, unless you're paying for it and managing it, it's their dime and their usage. So mobile devices present a series of issues, both for the security of your business, the security of your network, and the efficiency of your employees. Also, go backwards for just a moment. The router has a doorway out to the Internet, which is officially known as a gateway and has an address. And from there it goes out to a modem, and from the modem it goes out to the Internet. You can set up your router to let you go out through a service like OpenDNS, which will allow you to whitelist and blacklist the websites that people can get to, which again is just a way of managing the access that the machines inside of your company can use or not use. And at home, OpenDNS is a free service. At your business, I believe there is a subscription. But you can do this by groups of topics. I don't want my people going to anything about politics, or you may want them to stay off of shopping sites. And OpenDNS does a pretty good job of compiling their lists and blocking, so you are able to then take advantage of that. Let's move on to the credit cards, which as of October 1st of last year, if you do not have in your business what's called a dip machine, a machine where instead of swiping the card along the side, you are putting a chip into the card. If you have a fraudulent business transaction, the liability for that transaction will rest with you. In other words, somebody comes in and you don't have a dip machine and they spend $150 on a bogus purchase, your business is eating the $150 purchase. In order to have your credit card company continue to assume the liability, you must have what are called dip machines. And what those chips do is to write a unique transaction number to each credit card process, so that each and every time you use the card, there is a unique number, and then it writes it for the next transaction that you are going to do. So there are actually two numbers that are getting married: the number on the credit card itself and the number that's embedded in the chip. And when those two don't match up, the transaction is not approved. So, massive amount of information. As we've said earlier, this presentation will be up online, but for those of you who have done presentations, you know there are three parts to a presentation: tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. And we are now in the tell them what you told them or recap part. And again, I cannot stress the need to stay on top of this stuff and keep up to date, not only in what you know, but in the hardware and software that you use. Talk to other people. If you've got people in your industry that you want to get advice on a piece of software or a process, talk to them. They're probably facing the same issues as you are. This is no longer computing in a vacuum. Get advice from other people. Come to SCORE. We have counselors who can help you with this information as well. We are in a period of enormous change, and I want to try to bring that home to you. Once upon a time, you could buy snake oil in America, and you didn't need FDA approval or clinical trials. Once upon a time in America, you could crank up your car to chase the chickens around your front yard, and you didn't need a driver's license or insurance. And once upon a time in America, you could purchase a musket, and you didn't need a permit or a background check. In each of these situations, the rules, laws, regulations, call it whatever you would like, were changed for the safety and well-being of the general public. To buy a computer today, you don't even need cash. You can use your pre-approved credit card and you can go to town. So the question becomes whether the rules, laws, regulations, call it whatever you would like, need to be changed for computer usage. And I'm not going to offer an answer on that other than ask these people what they think about it, because this is the current list of companies that I track in the news that have been hacked. And they will probably have a far different opinion on the matter than most people who don't want their computers to be watched over or monitored, but I think we're in a period of change. And speaking of change, I read stuff by this fellow whenever it comes out in the Washington Post. I have never seen anyone with more credentials after his name, and he happens to write in plain English. So I think we're at a point where we need to see an alteration in how we use our computers and how computers are addressed online. And with that, folks, I will leave this open to your questions. I am happy to answer them.
Hey, Bud, thank you very much. This is Steve Smith again. We're going to use the remaining time for questions, and I see that's going to be about 10 minutes or so. And then, as I said before, make sure that you submit them in the lower left-hand corner in that box called chat. And I see we have one from Brian Milo. It goes like this: should you change the default gateway on the router? There you go, Bud.
Brian, I am literally looking at an article I read yesterday after purchasing a Netgear 7000 that said, an unpatched vulnerability exposes Netgear routers to hacking. One of the recommendations in the article is to, yes, change the gateway of your router. If you have the computers on your network set up to find the router automatically, they should be able to find it. If you have static IP addresses on your computers in your network, then you would just change that address for the gateway on the router. Having read through this article about Netgear, unfortunately it was another situation of not fabulously helpful information, because they did not mention in the article that when you buy a router, one of the first things I strongly urge you to do is to change the default password on the router, because otherwise you basically have free eats. So just to recap on that, on a Netgear router, the defaults are admin and password. If you changed password to that example that I had a ways back with the @ symbol and the S's becoming 5s, you can keep the word password in your head, but the actual password is now going to be different, and people are not going to be able to access your router or your network.
All right, great. Thanks for the question, Brian. Any other questions? That's the only one I see. I'd like to think we could get a couple more in here. We've got some time. And as we've said several times, this presentation and the verbiage to the presentation will be at scorefairfieldcounty.org within 4 to 5 days, maybe 6. Any other questions? Okay. Let me just close it then with first a reminder that we at SCORE Fairfield County have now gone to 2 webinars per month. It's usually going to be the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday of each month. As I indicated earlier, our next webinar is January 10th, Cliff and Co. Keeping Lawsuits at Bay. Assuming you like Bud, which I'm sure all of you did, you'll be enjoyed to know that he is coming back on the 24th of January to present somewhat of what we call an ongoing series, because it changes so much, called Technology Trends. We do that probably once every trimester, and it continues to be refreshed, and it serves as a good way for you all to keep abreast of what's going on in technology. So I think that's it, except for me just to say thank you very much to Bud, and a reminder to all of you out there, if you have any questions about SCORE whatsoever, go to scorefairfieldcounty.org. And with that, I'll close it and wish everyone happy holidays. Thank you very much. Goodbye.